June 2nd, here in Eden. I'm sitting here at the site of some pre-colonial wreckage, remnants of, you know, the slavery and genocide that built this part of the country. The people who did those things are lauded as having done wonderful things. And people like that are still lauded for doing things. But it's this selective memory thing that goes along with the Albert Pike quote about what we do for ourselves will remain secret, and what we do for others will be remembered into history, something like that. I love this location. It's beautiful. Here comes a car. I hope a resident doesn't have a problem with me being here. Anyways, today I'm going to talk about realizing at some point that maybe actually the maybe will last a long time. It might last a whole lifetime. That maybe you're one of the elect that the Bible talks about. And it's kind of a special group. We get mentioned a lot. When we think about being elected, you know, you've been chosen in by your peers. And if we're supposed to be transformed into the likeness of Christ in the course of our walk, and we're promised to become just like Him on the other side of the grass, then I suppose it's like an election if God were running elections. And the wrong folks don't get in because they've chosen something other than the golden ticket. And as I've said before, when you are given more dots through discernment and watchfulness and study, and allowing the scales to fall off, that's where the humility part comes in. When you get more dots, they connect differently. Similarly, but differently. And I've been thinking a lot lately as I get older and start to age out of some things that have brought me a lot of enjoyment in this life, such as playing guitar. My left hand is becoming chronically problematic, which is amazing because it's my right hand where I lost and then had reattached my forefinger 40-some, 50-some years ago after a work accident. This hand works fine. The one that had a finger cut off. Not this one. The one that makes the chords. The one that bends the notes. These knuckles. I don't think they have any cartilage in them. I think they're just sort of rusty pipes full of solids kind of in there. And having broken both wrists in the past, just ensured that I would age out. Of playing stringed instruments. I guess they got what they came here for. By the way, behind me is this anomalous building remnant sticking out of the ground, and there's another one just a little ways, a short walk that way. There's another strange Budapest-looking brick structure here in north central North Carolina, right below the Virginia border. And the lost tribe of Dan is very present all up and down the east coast of the United States, going all the way back. There were some elect people that came here with the right intentions, and thank goodness for them. But a lot of us were taken out. A lot of us were taken out 200, 300, 400 years ago, 500 years ago. They definitely were dark ages. And then after that was the illuminated Enlightenment age. Get rid of the source documents and then write new ones. Well, at any rate, so how do you begin to know that you're one of the elect? Good morning. Glad it stopped raining. Yeah. Give the tomato plants time to make something. I like talking to people. Okay, so it occurs to me now, and this is with the help of so many of the people that are in the same ministry that I'm in, which is seed casting digitally, and certain things that pop up become numinous. It's the upside of the pain rhythm, is that one's online behavior is built upon. So if what you're built upon is the Word of God, then it stands to reason that the algo, the pain rhythm, or the pain mathematic, is going to seek to profit from that and give you more things to view. And that's been really helpful, right? That's how I found Devin kept going. Philip Anthony Mitchell's church, Ed Trevor's church up in Canada, a number of different clinicians who are either overtly or not very effectively covertly Christians, and elect people who are helping us understand that the original sin of pride is narcissism. Okay? I'm not a person that goes to therapy or really believes in that stuff, even though as a teacher I worked with a lot of people that had degrees in psychology and counseling, and I can see how that stuff can be helpful, provided its delivery is coming from someone where that's just a tool in the toolbox of the elect. So, in addition to the fruit of the Holy Spirit being present as sort of secular behaviors, you know, she was a good kid when she was young. He was a good kid when he was young. It's because they were bearing fruit, which people often credit to the parent or the parenting. I do and I don't. Okay? Parents who are genuine believers and well read enough not to get belligerent, rather fascistic in the home, and in the same way as the priests and scribes, really law and rule driven. I taught the children of many families where their diets, their exercise regimen, their speech, how they dressed, which activities they would be involved in, were completely dominated by the choices of adults who didn't recognize that the free will of their children might be something that they're entitled to. And a lot of really troubled kids came out of these families, and every last one of them was a church-going family, who many of whom were even quite noisy about it. Okay, when they could use it as a cudgel, they did. They didn't use the Bible as a cudgel. They professed a belief, attached a secular concept to it about which they'd made a choice, and said, this is an expression of my faith. And in most cases, it was something that made another person really unhappy. Good. So that brings me back to my initial point. What I want to talk about today is that those of us who finally get the call, as I did when I was about 40 after a bad injury and some pharmaceutical issues that followed. And this just compounded a lifetime of drinking too much beer, man cave behavior, you know, and a lifestyle that was really quite extreme, with skiing and scuba diving and water skiing and rock climbing and all kinds of things going on before I was 15 years old. Very active, healthy kid, right? But there was something in me that propelled that. And it was the understanding from what the grown-ups in my life and my parents had told me. They basically told me that I was like a miracle child. Because when my parents wed, one of the things they both understood, and I think if my father is the kind of person who wanted children and grandchildren, this is a very noble thing to do, to marry a woman who's been told all her life that she'll never have children, you know, for anatomical reasons, okay? Just you know, she'd been told since she was an adolescent that her plumbing wasn't right and she wouldn't ever have kids. So for a man who would ever entertain the idea of having a son or a daughter, and that might be a fun thing, to marry a woman who was barren, okay, could be a very noble, Christ-like choice. But when I look at society, particularly in the last 30 years, a lot of people either have one kid or none. And many of these people are caught up in societal paradigms that are almost entirely driven by alcoholism, addiction, and lust, and lying, and persecuting people, either overtly or through neglect. And I've met more than a few men who would love to marry a barren woman because kids are expensive, right? Having children, whether you like it or not, consumes your time, consumes your resources, consumes your space to some extent, all of these things. And either you love being a parent with its ups and downs, or you'd rather not have to. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know which of those reasons was it love, or was it love plus that that led to this marriage? That's something that I'll never know on this side of the grass. But in 1959, I was born. And when I was old enough to understand what people were talking about, I began to catch on that the likelihood of that was really, really low. So I think life was precious to me on a very foundational level, as was a sense of being different, as was what continues to be a sense of being protected and delivered from injury, illness, and accident, while in each of those instances being given a scar to remember it. In here, and in many cases out here. All three realms. So I was born. That's the first miracle. And I'm quoting people. I have very, very fragmented information about the first 10 years of my life. We moved a lot. Transitions are hard for children and pets and grown-ups. And my formative years, the first 7 plus 3, when I was learning to communicate, calculate, and study, and was developing habits, was generally healing from a transition while preparing for the next one. By the time I was 6 or 7, I realized that making friends was a fruitless endeavor. And so I just sought people that were interesting to hang around with all their flaws. And I picked up a lot of bad behaviors then, and was abused twice, 6 and 8 years old, by people, in one case, who I never knew nor ever saw again, and in the second case, by the older sibling of an interesting person my age that we'd play, I was delivered through that. Those kind of things can go sideways. At age 2, I was delivered from a poisoning. If one of my kids had been poisoned when they were 2, I would remember it in striking 4-dimensional detail, okay? But nobody in my family does, or will it communicate what they remember, because all I've ever heard was that somehow or another I picked up a vessel of clear liquid that I thought was water, and it was charcoal lighter fluid, and drank from it, and that there was a stomach pump involved. That's it. That's all I know. But some sort of carelessness on the part of the people that were appointed to make that environment safe didn't. And I was delivered from that and healed and kept being a feisty, he's all boy. When we lived in the Midwest in Indiana, I caught double pneumonia. I had respiratory problems all the time in my life, always have. Here I am smoking. I've been delivered from this. It's almost like God wanted me to be proof that evil causes illness. What comes out of us, our walk, creates illness or not, and also leads to wellness, and that there are ways to relax and things that grow. He made it. That's why it's not in the Bible. It's not a forbidden thing. I avoid forbidden things. I moderate forbidden things. Survived double pneumonia. And the doctor told my parents that one of my lungs had collapsed and it might reinflate up to full size again or not. I might have diminished lung capacity. Okay. I got delivered through that. When I was 19 years old, one of the 2 times I left college to work and earn up enough money to go back and continue learning, I was working out near Rochester, New York, and this finger got cut off on a piece of sharp debris, and it was just hanging by the knuckle skin. I mean, I went clean diagonally through the main knuckle there, and it was just swinging around like an earring. My good friend Chris, rest in peace, threw me into his Volkswagen Rabbit and sped 12 miles to the nearest rural hospital where it was reattached. I was 7 years into playing guitar at that point. I had a aluminum U-shaped thing around that finger for the better part of the next 6 or 7 months. And when it came off, the finger worked great, and I was able to start playing guitar again. Amazing. Amazing. I know a guy who lost a pinky toe working at Little Caesars or some pizza joint. They were moving equipment, and when it came down, a cylindrical leg somehow went through his shoe and cut his pinky toe off. Just his pinky toe. And that this guy has been on full disability since then, and that was almost 20 years ago. He just sits home and eats painkillers and gets free groceries and rental assistance because he lost a pinky toe. I don't see a lot of coping skills there, nor prayer for deliverance from the injury, tiny though it may be. I can still play guitar with this hand just great. And I'm 66 in 2 months. I was involved in a multi-car accident that some other vehicle caused in the winter up above Syracuse, New York on a highway, Route 81, in the 70s. There were 8 vehicles in this accident. All of them got dented up some worse than others. Nobody died. And the worst thing that happened to anybody that was in my car, which was full of skis and boots and ski poles. This big old 69 Impala with 5 of us in it and all that skiing equipment. None of us got hurt except for the kid that was sitting beside the door that got impacted by another vehicle, and what he got was a bruise. A pretty bad bruise, but no broken bones or nothing. That was a deliverance. God keeps the elect in the game until they respond to the call. I got to keep saying this because this is the through line here. I hope my battery doesn't give out. I don't have any batteries in the truck. Satan, go away. And your little battery demon. God keeps us in the game. All these pawns, not really understanding the movement of the pieces of creation that come and go in their lives. Knights and rooks and bishops moving around us like preachers, cops, and politicians. But at some point you get the call from the king. The pawn gets the call. Go. But I'm so little. You can do this. You got this. The queen is screwed. Go get her. And sure enough, you do what the king told you, and you've got her. She can't do anything. The pawn is delivered from the most powerful piece on the board. Ostensibly. In 1996, when I was working with self-injurious adults who had either autism, mental retardation, Down syndrome, or were just so broken by their abusive childhoods that they were crazy. But what all these people had in common were behaviors that were violent. I got kicked in the head so bad by one of these people when they were having an episode that I was medically removed from the career. And it took me probably 15 years to recover the memories, and I haven't recovered all of them, but to recover the memories lost in that instant. I couldn't speak, I couldn't read, I was deaf in one ear, I couldn't tune a musical instrument without a visual tool to help me do that. Time began to feel different immediately, or at least how I perceive it. And, you know, I reached a new normal within about 3 or 4 years, and God delivered me through that. I was told by the neuropsychiatrist, who was a Harvard faculty member actually, he talked me through my healing in person and on the phone, and documented all that stuff. He said, don't ever get hit in the head again. Don't get in fights. Drive carefully. Because you just barely made it through this with functionality. And I thanked him when I've done that ever since. And as a hothead when I was a young man, I wouldn't have taken his advice, and I might have ended up doing something dangerous soon thereafter. But I outgrew that stuff. When I stopped being able to play sports, I didn't start watching sports on TV. I just channeled that kinetic energy into other things, rather than into a lazy boy with a cooler next to it. I was delivered from a profound closed head injury. The filing cabinet is much more orderly now, I think, than it was when I got kicked up here. God helped me do that. It's great. And also introduced me to my wife now of almost 30 years, right around that time. And she was also, and continues to be, a terrific healing and mnemonic blessing in my life, you know. Helps me remember, helps me choose, helps me realize when I'm getting near the edge of the narrow path with something, a feeling about something. In 2001, while teaching at a local middle school, some 8th graders got fighting. It had to do with turf and Ritalin resale. Speed, it's a type of speed. And a fray broke out, and I ended up with a very badly broken lower right leg. Not my ankle, but the bones in my lower leg. Both of them broken, shattered. A ½ inch of it went away. And I ended up on painkillers. I was already a fond beer drinker every single day. Too much after work, every day. No moderation. Sometimes driving out for more beer when I didn't need more beer. I wanted more beer, and I shouldn't have been driving. Stupid, 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 stupid behavior. And I've been delivered through 100 possible collisions in my car over my life. There's 365 days a year, and you look at a lot of kids in high school and college, and they're driving drunk every single day, home from the clubs, every day. I was like that. I know people that died driving drunk. I'm not one of them, but I sure could have been. Apologies to people that I scared. I was coming home from Greensboro one time in a station wagon we'd bought. It was a K car, a Plymouth. I bought a station wagon because I have guitars and amps and stuff. Used car. What I didn't know was that down in the back, underneath where the spare tire fits down below in the way back, there was a little rust hole right above the muffler, and carbon monoxide was able to fill the cabin of the vehicle eventually, if you drove it long enough with the windows up, which I was doing because it was a cold day. And so I've driven 40 minutes in this closed space in a car that's kind of new to me, and carbon monoxide doesn't really have a smell. And I'm coming over this 2-lane bridge into town. I'm very close to home, and all of a sudden I get tunnel vision, and everything looks as though I'm looking through a paper towel tube, and I'm like, oh God help me. And I was, at that point, I wasn't, I was still in the responding phase of having been called. I wasn't all in. I wasn't reading my Bible. I was doing cover band church, right? But I was zealous in some ways, not right ways. I was letting people tell me how to be zealous. Oh, cool, here comes a bike. But anyways, I prayed. This prayer is real numinous because it was answered immediately. I will never forget this prayer. I prayed that God would get me to the other side of the bridge before I passed out so that I could pull over. I could see oncoming traffic. And I'm on a 2-lane cement bridge. The last thing I remember before blacking out from the carbon monoxide in the vehicle, and I was sober, was seeing to my right a gully that went down full of large rocks, like a drainage gully. And that's it. And then I remember in my unconsciousness feeling an impact. And at the moment of impact, I felt hands, 2 hands, on my chest, right here, like this. I was wearing a seatbelt, but this was an older car that didn't have a chest strap. So I might have very easily been flung forward onto the steering wheel or the dashboard or the windshield. Because what had happened was that car drove another couple 100 yards with me out cold, up the same road, in the same lane, and then when there were no cars coming, it went to the left and hit a wooden telephone pole and wrapped around it. The engine moved back off the engine block. The radiator was destroyed. The front bumper was a V. And then I hear a voice as I open my eyes, and it's blurry, and I hurt because my shoulder and my hips and stuff have been, jolted so badly. But I didn't hit my head. I didn't hit the steering wheel. And as my vision is clearing, I hear a voice say, "He's alive!" And I look around the vehicle, and there are 4 or 5 elderly black people standing around my car looking in through the windows. None of the windows broke. And this one woman right next to me had just seen me move and come to. And someone opened the door, and I could see an ambulance pulling up. And there was a police car there, and people were approaching. And I undid my lap belt and started getting out of the car, and they were discouraging me from doing that. And I said, "No, I'm okay." And the police officer told me that, having used my license plate, they contacted my home and told my wife that I'd been in an awful accident. And then I saw her pulling up and walking up with this look on her face because she thought I was going to be dead or disfigured based on the way that the accident was described by someone who didn't know I was alive in the car. I was delivered from both the car accident and any kind of don't ever hit your head again kind of injury that could have happened. I was poisoned again, accidentally, about 10 years ago. And this is amazing, okay? Here's where social networking, for all of its flaws and vanity, was really helpful. Because no one in the medical community could figure out what happened to me. There was blood testing, all kinds of testing. I was in the hospital for about 24 hours. Maybe it was 2 days. And when I was going there, I thought I was going to die. Something was making my heart feel like it was going to burst in my chest. But it wasn't anything that a cardiac doctor could explain. But then a fellow in North Europe that I'd met through music on the Book of Face, because of this band I was in called Moon Men, or maybe it was Durats, Galaxies Collide. Afterwards, he pointed me in a direction that explained the whole thing. So here's what happened. My wife and I are in the kitchen cooking. She says, "Get me a potato." I say, "Okay." I pick up the bag of potatoes and I notice that there's some fluid in the bottom corner of the bag, which is a bad sign. That means that you've got a bad potato. And I found her a good one, and I said, "There's a bad potato in here. I'm going to go throw it out back." So I went outside, and I put the good potatoes in the sink and rinsed them off, and the bag stunk. Have you ever smelled a rotten potato? Oh my Lord, it's terrible. Awful. It'd make the hair in your nose turn into an afro wig. You know what I'm talking about? And I was carrying it down off the back deck stairs, and I was barefoot. And I was heading over to where I put potatoes to grow. One drop of that fluid that was in the bag that I was carrying fell and landed right on the top of the middle of my left foot and immediately burned like acid. It felt like a hot coal had landed on my foot. And I dropped the bag, turned on the hose, and rinsed off my foot. And it continued burning. And then I went back in the house and I sat on the edge of the bathtub and got some soap and washed it real good. And by now it had turned red. There was this red dime-sized O on my foot. And I told my wife, "That's weird. A drop of that potato juice got on my foot and kind of burned a little round circle on it." She's like, "Yeah, that's weird." Well, the next day, I got up early and ran down to Hardee's to get a sausage biscuit. I don't do that anymore, but I used to. They're delicious. But anyway, but they're greedy. All right, they used to have a coupon, two for $2.59. They don't do that anymore, and they should. I think that every fast food place should have a $1 item that has meat and bread. They should just do it. It's a loss leader, but it helps the poor. Do that, stupid. Hardee's doesn't. Screw them. But anyways, I'm coming home from Hardee's. I've got about a bite of that biscuit in my head, and it's a mile to my house. 2 or 3 turns. I get to my street, and all of a sudden, my heart and my shoulder here are just burning up with sharp pain. When I inhale, it hurts. When I exhale, it hurts. When I steer, it hurts. It is so harsh. And I get home and I walk up on the porch and I ask my wife to call the ambulance. I think I'm having a heart attack. And she does. And they take me to the local hospital, and then they zoom me down to the Greensboro hospital, and I remain there for 2 days, and I go through all these tests. But after having been given some sort of perhaps muscle relaxant at the local hospital, I began to feel better, and the whole remainder of it was just getting to feel better and better and better, and saying, "Can I go home yet?" "No, we need to do some more tests." Well, they never figured out what happened, and ultimately I was I was actually doing pretty okay by that night. And then the next day, I just wanted to go home, and I finally became such a pain in their ass that they let me go home. This person on the Book of Face points me at a news article from Russia. About a family where all but one of them died because of rotten potatoes. And that it produces a super concentrated compound that is similar to cyanide, which can be a gas or a liquid, and I suppose it can be dehydrated into a powder, a dry powder as well. It's some deadly stuff. Well, this suggestion from this fellow, thank you, I don't remember your name, answered it. A drop of super concentrated cyanide hit my foot. I rinsed it off, but it had already, in some respects, entered my bloodstream. I washed it off with soap. Still too late. They say that you can die from touching fentanyl with your fingertip. Okay? It took about another maybe 12 hours, or 10 to 12 hours for that stuff, that little bit of it that was entered my body through a foot, to get here. And when it did, when it was at its height of potency, and I hadn't flushed any of that out yet, Houston, we have a problem. So there's another poisoning that I was delivered from. I'm not bragging. I still wasn't all in with Christ, but I was most certainly being provided with a lot of dots and proofs. And this is a testimony that just has to do with surviving health catastrophe, because there's a purpose ahead that you're required for, that you may not be aware of. I hope everybody finds their purpose while they still have breath in their lungs. But the really amazing part that I want to tell you is about a healing, because we hear about the laying on of hands and people being healed. And this morning I was listening to a fabulous message about the woman that had a gynecological problem that seemed almost like hemophilia for years, more than 10 years. And a little bit of prophecy in the Old Testament, the Lord unpacked for her as the solution to her problem. It required that she go to the place where the solution is, which happened to be Jesus. And she felt that that prophecy, I think it's in Malachi, was saying that when the Messiah comes, he will bring healing in the wings, in his wings will be healing. And in the common vernacular back then, the tassels at the bottom of the priest's garments were called wings. And so her takeaway from the prophecy was, if I could get to where this Messiah is and just touch the tassels of his garment, I'll be delivered from this thing, health problem. So she answered the call. She went to where Jesus was. She prostrated herself and she touched his garment. and she was healed. She got her testimony, as I have, a healing testimony, a being delivered from testimony. The mark of the elect is, I honestly believe, one of the marks of the elect is survivability and long-suffering, even before you answer the call. So I've heard about laying on of hands. I've heard about snake handling. I've heard about all kinds of crazy things, okay, that dovetail with words in the Bible, but don't necessarily align with what we should be doing with those words. But about 12 years ago, I was asked if I would like to participate in a Christian retreat that's called the Emmaus Walk in this part of the country, the Virginias and the Carolinas, by someone who had done it, and he felt that it deepened his faith. He asked me if I would be interested in doing this 2.5-day weekend retreat, and that he would sponsor me. I talked to my wife. The weekend was open. I said, yes, I'd like to do that. And the Emmaus Walk is based on that part of Scripture where people encounter Christ but don't realize that they have until later, and the realization propels them into deeper belief and better servanthood. Yeah, I could use some of that. No phones allowed, no computers allowed. If there's a family emergency, the staff of this retreat will let you know. They can be reached. If it's a real emergency, you will be notified. And in fact, I think we had 1 or 2 people that actually had something come up and had to split. They couldn't continue the weekend. And we did a lot of fun, kinetic role play and discussion, and listened to a lot of preaching, and did small group work, and had fabulous meals. Loved it, right? It was kind of like the school lunch ladies of the 60s and 70s were doing the cooking, back when school lunches were basically home cooking. And we slept in bunkhouses, and we had journals. We could journal. And on the very last night that we were there, during Vespers, I need to study up where that expression Vespers comes from. I hope it's not a Roman emperor, Vespasian or something. Maybe it is. Listen to those sirens. They asked at the end of the quiet last message of the day if anybody needed healing. And they'd done this before too, and I watched people respond and express what their need was. And because I've had to cope with so much in my life, when, like the Apostle Paul said that there was a thorn in his side that really troubled him, it may have been an injury, it may have been a vice, who knows, right? That he'd pray for it to go away, but the Lord left it in him as a reminder of some sort to cope. Right? This isn't a big thing. That goes away later, as you know. I'm watching these people. I'm watching them, at the very least, if this is an empty performative thing to do, at least it would make you feel good to have people praying around you and stuff. It might inform your prayers about your own condition. And maybe the Lord isn't ready to heal you is another thing. Or maybe you frankly haven't responded to the Lord yet and your prayers fall on deaf ears. He doesn't know you yet. And I knew that they were going to dismiss pretty soon. And I wouldn't be seeing these guys tomorrow night. I'd be back home again. So I raised my hand. I talked very briefly about this leg that was broken when I was a teacher. And how it gave me trouble every single night. You've heard of this restless leg syndrome that people with unbroken legs have? Well, my leg and ankle and hip, I just had all kinds of skeletal-muscular issues because of the injury, because of walking with crutches and then a cane for a while and stuff. And plus, I'd been managing that with what the doctors had prescribed me, which had by then turned into a full-blown addiction. And, you know, and I was still working as a teacher. So it was affecting my sleep, the side effects of the meds, the painkillers, even though they were legal, were producing in me some of the things God hates, the opposite of the fruit of the Holy Spirit in terms of my words, mismanagement of my emotions, and that weird hook in your lip that addiction gets in there and propels you in directions you ought not go, yanking on the rope attached to the hook and just pulling you out to get another beer at 11:30 at night. You know, or like one of our old neighbors, putting all three of your young children in the minivan at midnight, getting them out of bed, taking their blankets and pillows, getting them in the minivan, and then driving to a crack house and just telling them to sleep in this locked vehicle while you go in and get high. This is the kind of stuff that I've seen in this community. It's really rampant. Drug addiction is no fun, and chronic pain is no fun. But neither one of them is a reason not to be with Christ. So I raised my hand, and 40 or 50 men came to the chair I was sitting in, and they put their hands on me, and we all started praying out loud. And 10 years before this, I had written a song with the lyrics, which a lot of my friends like to play too, and people like to hear. I thought it was about an artist, and it was, but it wasn't about Marcel Duchamp, even though the name of the song is Marcel. It was about Jesus Christ as the artist who should be inspiring all artists to use their gift to heal. Because in that song it says, this is the lyric to the song. It's a metaphor. The laying on of hands. Hands without arms. Just hands. A pile 4 feet wide, 2 miles high, swaying. Whose hand will crown this mound? Whose hands are these? Slap, 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 slap. Here comes another one, falling from the sky. But that's not a hand. It's a heart. Right on top of the hands. Whose hand will crown this mound? Whose hands are these? Slap, slap, slap. So here I am at the Emmaus walk. Hands are slapping down on me, so to speak. And then Jesus enters the room. This was an appointed moment in my life. He's the heart on top of these hands. And I feel something come through me. And I dare say that 2/3 of the pain that I was experiencing for the several years since the injury until that day, poof, gone. Just like that. No ambiguity about how it happened or that this means something. This matters. Because even though earlier in my life I'd been delivered and healed through some pretty incredibly traumatic things, the environment I was in never described those things as acts of God in my life. And God had primed me all through my childhood with comic books, monster movies, giant critter science fiction, apocalyptic literature, Orwell, Huxley, McLuhan, Solari, the classics, Pliny. It was this healing that happened to me which provided the dot I needed then, and I'm so grateful for it, because it was the dot that said, now you will never doubt the supernatural in God's Word and try to flatten it down to something human. Now you know. And like 1/3 of the angels that were swept by the tail of the dragon from heaven, I was left with that thorn. 33% of the injury remains. And I'm cool with that. I'm not taking Oxy at all. I haven't in years. I've moderated my alcohol intake down to no more than 2 a day, usually 1 a day, and very often none a day. I've moderated my walk so that it doesn't take me to places that would allow Satan to pitch me back into bad social behavior and convince me that I'm lonely enough to do this, and convince me that I am wealthy enough to do this, and convince me that nothing bad's going to happen if you go back and do the bad thing you used to do. I don't go to those places. I don't associate with the serpent seed. I once did. Now I don't. I don't, because every supernatural thing that the Bible says happened. The easy explanations are never accurate. Okay? Where does evil come from? Oh, well, it was the daughters of Cain and the sons of Seth. No, it wasn't. The supernatural explanation, which is there, is the reason that my leg got broken. It's the reason I was poisoned twice. It's the reason that even though I was taken to church as a child, I never knew Jesus. I think I saw the red light flash. This could be a bad sign. I need to wrap it up. So, I say all that to say this. Dig into the Bible. You see that weird building in the distance over there sticking out of the ground? The Bible, when you open it, there will be things sticking out of the Bible that will grab your eyeball and put you right where you need to be. And it'll get bigger every time you open it. If you keep following the rabbit trails rather than getting sucked into rabbit holes. Okay? If you're alive and you can hear this today, you've been delivered through a lot. You have a lot of dots. You need to connect the dots in your own life. Get your own house in order. Then start working on your own neighborhood. And love your neighbor. All of them. You don't have to like them. Love them. And know where you live. Be watchful. Be discerning. When you find need, reach in with solution. Where you find sin, pivot. Where you see powers and principalities that might try to frighten you into submission, you and God are a majority. Ain't gonna happen. Worst thing they could do is run you off the road and kill you or something. Watch what God does with that if they do it. The great thing about God is He allows people to imagine all kinds of horrible things, but most people, God can put a fear in them that'll keep them from implementing those things. Right? How many of us don't envision a little vengeful thing to do regarding something? Or a extreme solution to something that you're tired of seeing? But we don't do it because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I think part of what we're going to be credited for in the future, we won't just be credited for the fruit, the things that were produced, but I think we'll also be credited for the things we didn't produce but could have. When we declined to listen to the devil's shoulder because the Jesus shoulder said, don't listen to that clown. The world isn't very funny. My wife likes to watch comedians, and I can't blame her. It's their job to make light of dark things. Some of them are better at it than others. There's nothing funny about salvation. There's nothing entertaining about a fallen world. And the elect, who are every bit as fallen as anybody else, the elect are going to be delivered and healed through the poisons that the world has placed into them. And they're going to be washed clean. And God's going to keep calling. He's going to keep dialing. He's going to keep knocking. And I can say with absolute sincerity to anyone with ears, that surrender, the opening of the door and the passing through to the new realm, will be the easiest decision you've ever made when you finally make it, or the most difficult decision you haven't made yet because you're afraid of the world. Be watchful and discerning and study, and your ministry will be given to you. You can't fix everything, but you can do the things that you were born to do. You can preach the things you've lived in the context of Scripture, and other people are going to resonate with your lived experience. It's all you've got. You were made to be you, be you. It's a really nice day out here, isn't it? All right, let's have a great June. What is this, number 48, 49? Good heavens. Be blessed.